Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in on a great viewer question, and that is to talk about the covert narcissist relationship and an experience of sort of learned helplessness or learned hopelessness. When you are in a relationship with someone who is covert narcissistic, we are talking about someone really who has a pathological sense of self-importance, and coupled with a lack of empathy, which gives them sort of a one-track mind, a sort of single-track decision-making foundation, which sort of just loops back to as long as it feeds them and it feeds their ego, which their ego is based on judgment of themselves and others as they compare. So ego, they have a very, their decision making oftentimes is very in the subset of the ego, which is based on judgment, which is how do I compare to others, how do I judge others, and how do I want to stack up as I compare in judgment to others. So there's always a ruler, if you will. There's always a measuring stick for the ego. The ego is always trying to, how do I measure up against? There's always a juxtaposition, or how do I compare to? And this, can be a source of competition, and sometimes it can lead to, inspiration. It can lead to, igniting some very good behaviors, thoughts, and developments and innovations. But when we're talking about someone who has a lack of empathy, they're doing it oftentimes to the detriment or injury of others, otherwise known as like stepping on someone to get ahead, throwing someone under the bus to make you look good, dimming someone else's light so you can shine brighter. So when you're being targeted by this, they're trying to diminish or minimize others. So if they can dwarf or make others small, they can enlarge themselves instantaneously. This is a very difficult and a very painful position to be in, because it will create a feeling of learned helplessness or learned hopelessness, which is based on observation and oftentimes not resolved through open and honest communication, which means there isn't a checks and balances going on. A covert narcissist sort of shimmies out of, or backslides out of being responsible or accountable. They just sort of get out of that. It's not my job. That's not my department. I'm not here. This is not for me. Go and give this to so-and-so. So they just sort of are able to bypass what you might consider work, what you might consider tough discussions, what you might consider holding accountable, to learn for the betterment of all. So because the covert narcissist sort of just ducks out, shrieks out, or is not present, or to be able to have a normal or reasonable discussion, not based out of anger or narcissistic rage, oftentimes which feels like a projection of hostility, which makes it very difficult to have communication in that emotional environment. When, the narcissistic rage, there's a narcissistic injury going on, where they feel that they have been attacked or challenged. So you're then their ego, which is they need to protect at all costs, which is what they're about, sort of the enlarging and inflating of the ego, especially as it's based on comparison. So we're not talking about sort of, we're talking about the good old-fashioned struggle of the ego, good old-fashioned, judgment. You are, I'm not, and then the blame game. And so they just sort of check out. And so they're like an emotional Swiss cheese. They just aren't present. They just don't feel like it's their place. It's not my department. Go ask Sony over there, or whoever over there for this and this. Go ask Jenny over there. So they just, even though they're the one who needs to have the discussion, they just sort of check out. They're not present. They don't feel that they want to give the time, the energy, the effort, or go through the emotional pain. They do not like to be challenged. They do not like to be held accountable. So when you want to have this discussion, they oftentimes will erupt then in that sort of rage. And then people find that very uncomfortable. So this is not a very rewarding behavior. So it's called, they extinguish their behavior. That's a psychological term for they no longer do that anymore. The behavior, so for wanting to have that sort of communication or that conversation, is extinguished. That's a psychological term meaning for snuffed out or not rewarded or reduced or eliminated. So to extinguish a behavior, oftentimes it will become extinguished if it's not rewarded or if pain is experienced. So a lot of others who are then in their environment, quote unquote, enable the covert narcissist to get away with it, meaning they allow it or they encourage it or they unconsciously support it by not holding it accountable, by not getting their own needs met. So they learn to be helpless. They learn to be hopeless. They learn that things will never change. So they create this sort of gestalt or universal decision making that becomes all-encompassing. I am ineffective. I am shameful. I am wrong. I am crazy. I am asking too much. I am too sensitive. So they then interpret it negatively and they sort of put a very small lid on your personality. So it becomes then a self-limiting belief, which then creates sort of like a smaller sort of I am than what your full I am is. So we talk about like self-actualization or self-development or living up to your potential or being empowered, being your authentic or real self. So it's like you're not hitting on all cylinders. It's like instead of going from a big 270 horsepower I am, it's like going to a tricycle. You can barely pedal it. You literally might feel that you're having to make yourself smaller. You're trying to pedal it because you've had to become this smaller self because of a lack of communication, and then therefore people go through a learned hopelessness or a learned helplessness, which means they feel ineffective or powerless to change. Either that the relationship can't grow or they can't grow or change. They have this permanent feeling of shame, a permanent feeling of I am dumb, a permanent feeling of I am ugly or I'm unattractive or I'm unlovable or I'm stupid or I'm whatever the negative that the person sort of lobbed back to you, and you go, whoa, I don't want that look again. I don't want that feeling again. Whatever it is, the look that could kill, the dead silence, the stonewalling, the silent treatment, the whatever negative sort of claw or whatever you have that the person, ice wall, whatever you want to call it. I mean, name it yourself so you kind of understand that, and then understand that that is part of a character that sort of lives in you. You sort of adopt it as a bedfellow, as they would say. All these strange words coming up from my study of English. I mean, this is what we study. So I'm just trying to give you kind of some ways of understanding and sort of recapitulating things so that you can understand. So meaning it makes for a strange bedfellow, which means it lives within you, and you begin to court this negative behavior and have a relationship with this negative feeling inside, which then you will reinforce, and rememorize and rehearse. So then it becomes a global part of what we call your identity, which means what you identify with. I am. And then it also is coupled with sort of a real image of how you see yourself. So if you see yourself in a learned helpless or a learned hopeless state, then that's the image that you're feeding. This is a subconscious fuel. This is like a emotional kerosene that affects your behavior moment by moment, minute by minute, day by day, decision by decision, breath by breath. This is sort of what's, fueling your inner fire. Whether you make a new decision and a new path and then have faith to pursue it or don't. And so this is part of the learned helplessness, which you really have to unpack and make sure is not infiltrating, or it is not polluting or creating a limiting self-belief for you that's closing your eyes to the opportunity of what life has in store, or your potential, or the right decision making, what they would call in Buddhism, I would believe, as right decision. I did study Buddhism, as part of my studies in college, or I think it was called like Religions of the World or something. And, something with Buddhism, they talk about the right path, the right action, the right, so this is so it's kind of like you're on that right path again. Things begin to come together. Things come to light. I understand it now. I see what we were talking about. I have an aha moment. So you have to unlearn the learned helplessness. You have to unlearn the learned hopelessness to liberate and free yourself and become strengthened and secure in your I am, so that you can have that I am and that identity shift and a change of energy into the positive and the passion and making the right decisions. Even if it's as much as, I believe in myself now. I believe in my ability to be healthy. I believe in my ability to be happy. I believe in my ability to grow and have relationships. I believe in my talent. I believe in my fresh path. I believe, and then having that fuel, and then you are then no longer afraid, and then you're empowered. You're on the right path. You're grounded and in alignment. This is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. I hope that these videos do help. Please share, please subscribe, and for goodness sake, please donate for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support. Peace out, peace in, peace be with you, and have a beautiful day. You've got this.